They mocked him, belittled his work, and swore he'd come crawling back. But Jerry? He had other plans. What started as another soul-crushing summer job turned into the most satisfying revenge story this small rural town had ever seen. The best part? Jerry didn't lift a finger to destroy his enemies. They did it to themselves. Stick around, because this isn't just a tale about bricks and mortar. It's about confidence, respect, and sweet poetic justice. In a sleepy corner of the state, tucked between rolling hills and narrow highways, lay a handful of small rural towns where everybody knew everybody. You kept your head down, took the abuse, and hoped you wouldn't be the one getting screamed at that day. Turnover was through the roof. Some guys lasted a few weeks, some a few days. Just another young man looking to earn a paycheck during the summer. Polite, quiet, always on time. He showed respect even when none was shown to him, and a quiet belief in himself that had been drilled into him by a father who refused to let life's obstacles define him. Jerry's father, wheelchair-bound for as long as Jerry could remember, had taught him a powerful lesson. Never let someone else's opinion determine your value. Measure yourself by your actions, not by their words. To the casual observer, Jerry might have seemed like another pushover, another wide-eyed rookie who hadn't yet been chewed up and spit out by the jerk machine. Clean, straight, fast. He listened to their criticism, nodded respectfully, and got back to work. Not because he believed them, but because he didn't need their validation. A couple quit during lunch breaks and never came back. These were the kinds of places where local diners still served bottomless coffee for $1, and a man's reputation could travel faster than a pickup with no muffler. In this tight-knit community, there was only one bricklaying contractor. His father had been wheelchair-bound for most of his life, but he was a force of nature, unshakable, earned through action, not ego. A man who refused to let his disability define him, who showed Jerry by example what it meant to persevere when life gets hard. That man taught Jerry the value of grit, of dignity, of getting the job done even when the odds are stacked against you. They barked orders like drill sergeants and belittled their workers constantly. The kind of worker any sane boss would be lucky to have. But in Jerk's world, praise was weakness and control was everything. So instead of acknowledging Jerry's talent, Jerk tried harder to break him. And every insult, every sneer, every "you're not worth your pay" was just more fuel for the fire. Day after day, brick after brick, stronger, better, and more confident than the day before. He used the pressure like a forge, letting it refine his skills, toughen his resolve, sharpen his mind. And while others cracked or walked off the site in frustration, Jerry stood his ground. More yelling, more insults, more public put-downs in front of the crew. Compared to that, Jerk was just noise. Annoying, yes, but not something that could shake Jerry's sense of worth. No wall was ever straight enough, no pace ever fast enough. To him, Jerry was just another soft-spoken newbie who would crack under pressure like all the rest. And Jerry didn't correct that assumption. Why would he? While Jerk berated him, called him slow or useless, Jerry just nodded and went back to work. His calmness only seemed to irritate Jerk, more like a boxer who throws wild punches but keeps missing. He wasn't folding under pressure or running off in frustration. In fact, when he first got hired by Jerk and Son, he barely made a ripple. He called the boss sir, kept his tools clean, and worked like he had something to prove not to Jerk, but to himself. While others grumbled or gave up, Jerry just kept laying brick, one line at a time, perfectly straight, methodically clean. Just another young man with calloused hands and a quiet tone, looking for work during the summer. But under that calm surface was a fire they didn't see coming. He was getting better faster, sharper, more skilled right under Jerk's nose. And all the while, he kept his head down and his mouth shut. Every employee was too slow, too sloppy, or not worth the dirt under their boots. But the irony? Jerk needed them. Desperately. With no competition in town, every general contractor had to go through him, and that meant constant jobs and money rolling in. Still, he treated his workers like they were disposable. Just one, and he ran the show like a dictator in dusty boots. His name wasn't Jerk, of course, but that's what everyone called him behind his back. He and his grown son ran the only masonry outfit in the area, and their names were synonymous with cheap insults, hot tempers, and broken spirits. To work for them was a rite of passage for young men who didn't have many options in town, and for most, it was a short-lived one. Jerk and son were equal parts arrogant and cruel. The worst part? Everyone just accepted it. If you needed work and had 2 working hands, you worked for Jerk. But then there was Jerry. He didn't look like much at first. But Jerry was different. What Jerk didn't too know, what nobody really knew, was that Jerry had something most others didn't. A backbone made of steel. So while Jerk and son hurled insults, Jerry laid brick, and that was the first crack in Jerk's empire. Because unlike every other guy who came and went, Jerry wasn't breaking. He wasn't planning revenge. He didn't need to. Jerry was building something stronger than bricks. He was building a reputation. Jerry wasn't flashy. He didn't walk onto the job site with swagger or stories about how he was going to be the best bricklayer in town. From day one, Jerry showed up early, kept his mouth shut, and did what he was told. What Jerk and son didn't know, what they couldn't possibly understand, was that Jerry came from a household where real toughness wasn't measured by how loud you yelled or how many men you could bully. Jerry's dad didn't raise a victim. He raised a man who understood that insults are just noise, and that confidence isn't loud, it's quiet. Jerk, of course, saw none of this. But here's the thing. Jerry was good. Really good. And not just good at laying brick. He was fast, precise, and consistent. Still, Jerry didn't flinch. He wasn't there to be liked. He was there to learn. What Jerk didn't know was that Jerry had already been through tougher battles, watching his father fight to be independent, to work, to live with dignity, despite the world trying to limit him. And so, while the rest of the crew cycled in and out like a revolving door, Jerry kept showing up. He wasn't just surviving the abuse, he was outgrowing it. And Jerk? He was too arrogant to see that the kid he thought was a pushover was quietly becoming his biggest threat. It was just another job, or at least it started that way. A mid-sized commercial building going up on the edge of town, nothing fancy. But this site, more than any before, would become the turning point in Jerry's story. His timing between trowel swipes was impeccable. He didn't waste motion or complain about the heat. He laid each brick like it mattered, and it did. And not because of the bricks, but because of who was watching. The sun was punishing that summer. Sweat-soaked shirts clung to backs before noon, and the air smelled like dust and diesel. Most of the crew looked like they were running on fumes. Not Jerry. He had one pace, steady, like a machine programmed to precision. He wasn't just laying brick, he was making art with mortar. Even among the rough and rugged standards of construction, Jerry's work stood out. His lines were razor straight. But he also noticed that one man didn't flinch. One man worked faster and cleaner than the rest, and still got nothing but grief for it. He saw how Jerry's walls didn't need rework, how his corners never required fixes, and how somehow the guy never lost his cool. These were calculated attempts to demean, to break a man's spirit, and too, that the kid in the gray t-shirt was being wasted. But you wouldn't know that by listening to Jerk and his son. No one can. But he's the only bricklayer around. Or at least he was. His trowel struck mortar with the same calm rhythm it always had. He knew the truth. His hands knew the truth. He didn't need their approval. Your own brick crew. I've got work lined up for months, if you're serious. I'll even loan you what you need to get started. He asked thoughtful questions, got clear on the expectations, and told Daniels he'd think about it. Pay me back when you can. All I ask is that you do what you're already doing, just for yourself. This time. It was the one piece of equipment Jerry didn't have, and it wasn't cheap. Daniels would buy it, lend it to Jerry to use immediately, and Jerry would repay him over time, job by job. The man who fixed appliances for neighbors, organized local events from a folding chair, and raised a son with enough self-worth to face down men like Jerk. What would Dad say? No interest. No contracts, just a handshake. Regret of not trying. Regret of staying small when he knew he was capable of more. He remembered laying those bricks with care and precision while being told he was worthless. And yet, he knew he had talent. I'm in, he said, extending his hand. Let's build something. Not because someone told him, but because he saw it in the work itself. He could already hear the mocking laughter. Told you. Should have stayed where you belonged. Daniels delivered the mixer, shiny and red, with a bow of electrical tape around one handle. It's yours now, he said. Treat it right, and it'll take you far. They hovered behind Jerry, arms crossed and mouths loaded with insults. What the hell is that? His boots were still dusty from the day's work, and his hands ached, but it was the good kind of ache. No gimmicks. Just honesty, quality, and a reputation he was ready to earn brick by brick. Earned. Honest. And now, that hard work had brought him to a crossroads. He just smiled, thanked them for the opportunity, and walked away quiet and calm, like always. Jerk cackled so hard he nearly dropped his coffee. You? Starting your own crew? That's rich. His son doubled down. You'll be back in 2 months. Broke and begging. Jerk barked, pointing to a corner Jerry had just finished, perfectly level and square. He wasn't the kind of man to meddle, but he wasn't blind either. For the first time in his life, the path forward wasn't just a daydream. It was right there, laid out in front of him like a blueprint. But big dreams come with big risks. From his perch on the second-level scaffolding, or while pretending to check his clipboard, Daniels had spent days observing the crew. Mostly, he was watching Jerry. You trying to build a wall or a sculpture? Speed up. Son added, don't let the pretty lines fool you. Daddy's slow. Kid's not pulling his weight. The cruelty was so over the top, it bordered on parody. But it wasn't funny. These weren't jabs between buddies on a worksite. And still, Jerry didn't react. He wiped sweat from his brow, adjusted his line, and kept working. What Jerry didn't know was that someone else saw the truth too. The general contractor overseeing the project, let's call him Mr. Daniels, had been watching closely. He noticed how the other workers rotated in and out of frustration, how Jerk and Son verbally bulldozed everyone on site. Daniels had been in the game long enough to recognize 2 things. One, that the contractor he hired, Jerk, was a toxic mess. That day, after the crew wrapped up and started packing tools, Daniels made his move. Hey, Jerry, hang back a minute. Jerry turned, a bit unsure. He hadn't spoken more than a few words to Daniels before. Yes, sir? Daniels looked around, waited for the others to be out of earshot, then leaned in. Jerry shrugged humbly. Just trying to do the job right, Daniels smiled. You're doing more than that. Look off the record. I can't stand working with your boss. Jerry's eyebrows lifted slightly. What do you mean? I mean, I'd like to help you start your own thing. Jerry was stunned. It was the kind of opportunity guys dreamed about, but never expected. Still, he didn't rush the answer. But deep down, Jerry already knew the answer. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was a door, swinging open one brick at a time. Jerry couldn't sleep that night. The offer from Mr. Daniels replayed in his mind like a film stuck on repeat. Start your own business. Use your own name. Build something real. Daniels wasn't offering charity. He made that clear. I'm not giving you a handout. Jerry, I'm offering you a hand up. The centerpiece of the offer was a cement mixer. In return, Daniels offered consistent work. I've got builds lined up for the next year, he said. Jerry sat on his small back porch that evening, sipping iced tea, watching the sun dip behind the trees. He thought of his father, the man in the wheelchair who had never once let life tell him what he couldn't do. Jerry didn't have to wonder long. He knew. He'd tell me to bet on myself. Jerry whispered aloud. Still, doubt crept in. What if it all fell apart? What if Jerk was right? What if Jerry failed and had to come crawling back? But then, something shifted. Jerry realized he didn't fear failure. He feared regret. By morning, the decision was made. Jerry met Daniels at the job site trailer before the others arrived. Daniels grinned and shook his hand firmly. You won't regret this. And just like that, Jerry became a business owner. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and hardware store runs. Jerry registered his business under a simple name his own, but not everyone was excited about the news. When Jerry gave his notice to Jerk and Son, the response was everything you'd expect. Jerry didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. But inside, the fire was lit. He was no longer just laying bricks for someone else's dream. Now he was building his own. Jerry didn't make a big announcement. No dramatic send-off. No victory speech. He believed in doing things the right way, even with people who hadn't shown him an ounce of respect. So when it came time to leave, he approached Jerk and Son the same way he approached everything else, with calm professionalism. It was the end of a long workday, the kind where your boots feel like concrete and your shirt could stand up on its own. Most of the crew had already left when Jerry walked up to Jerk and his son, wiping mortar from his hands. I've decided to take another opportunity and go into business for myself. I wanted to let you both know, he began. I'm giving my notice. I've got a mixer coming in, he said simply. And I've got work lined up. He clutched his gut like Jerry had just told the best joke he'd ever heard. You? He barked. Starting your own brick crew? For a moment, silence. Let me tell you how this is going to go. You'll be back in 2 months tops. Broke, tired, and begging to come back. And you know what? I'll let you. But you'll start at the bottom. You won't be special anymore. Then Jerk let out a laugh, so loud it echoed off the nearby scaffolding. You've got no equipment, no team, no clue. His son chimed in, smirking. What are you going to do lay bricks with fairy dust? Not out of doubt, but closure. He knew they were still laughing. He knew they didn't believe he'd make it. But what they thought didn't matter anymore. Jerry stood his ground, unfazed. Jerk sneered. He didn't to remind them of how many times he had saved their deadlines, or how many walls he defixed after their mistakes. He didn't have to. Jerry didn't flinch. He didn't argue. There was no boss barking orders, no insults flying through the air like nails from a gun. Just Jerry, his new mixer humming beside him, and a stack of fresh bricks waiting to be laid. He was nervous, sure, but there was a quiet excitement in his chest. For the first time in his life, the only voice that mattered on the job site was his own. Instead, he nodded respectfully. Thank you for the opportunity. I learned a lot here. Jerry was still figuring out logistics, hauling materials, setting schedules, and hiring help where he could. He started picking up projects that Jerk would have gotten by default just a year earlier. And what is more, he started getting calls from subcontractors and workers who used to avoid masonry jobs like the plague. They wanted in. But thanks to Mr. Daniels, the general contractor who believed in him, Jerry didn't have to worry about finding work. Daniels kept him booked solid with steady jobs and made sure other contractors in the area knew about this new guy who does clean work and doesn't act like a jackass. He remembered what it was like to be talked down to, so he made sure every guy on his crew felt valued. And he's not a headache to deal with. He paid fairly. He listened. He taught the same way he learned patiently, through action. Their jobs were drying up. General contractors, fed up with their drama, were passing them over more and more. Even hired a full-time assistant to help manage job flow. His business was small, but booming. They couldn't figure out why until someone finally told them. About time someone else took over, they'd say. Kid's doing it right. And just like that, Jerry wasn't just building structures. He didn't need to. Every contract he signed, every wall he laid, every compliment he got, that was the revenge. Jerk scoffed. Yeah, sure you did. It didn't take long for word to spread that working with Jerry was a totally different experience. He was firm but fair, efficient but human. He didn't just get the job done, he got it done right. But then they'd see Jerry's craftsmanship, the precision, the speed, the way he left a job site cleaner than he found it. Everything Jerk had failed to be over decades of arrogance and cruelty. Contractors who had sworn off brick projects altogether suddenly reconsidered, now that they didn't have to deal with the nightmare of Jerk and Son. And that was it. He was leaving behind the lies that had been thrown at him day after day and stepping into something bigger, something his own. Jerry simply turned, grabbed his gear, and walked away. No slamming doors, no shouting match. But that moment quiet, as it seemed, was seismic, because Jerry wasn't just quitting a job. He was walking away from every insult, every moment of disrespect, every time he was told he wasn't good enough. As he tossed his tool belt into the bed of his truck, Jerry glanced back one last time. What mattered was the mixer on the way, the jobs already promised, and the fact that Jerry was no longer working for a man who couldn't see his value. He didn't need a crowd cheering him on. He didn't need revenge. All he needed was one brick at a time, and he was more than ready to lay the foundation of something they could never tear down. The first day, Jerry worked for himself, felt almost surreal. The first few weeks were rough in the ways any startup would expect. Jerry stayed true to his values. He treated his small crew with respect, giving clear instructions, praising good work, and helping fix mistakes without humiliation. Clients started requesting him by name. At first, some were skeptical. Isn't that the kid who used to work for Jerk? They'd ask, and Jerry? He kept his head down and let the results speak for themselves. Within a few months, Jerry's jobs were being finished ahead of schedule. Are you hiring? They'd ask. Heard you're different. Jerry never let success go to his head. He was building loyalty. Meanwhile, Jerk and Son were starting to feel the heat. Jerry's doing better work than you, one contractor reportedly said. That line hit like a brick to the ego. At first, Jerk scoffed. Let's see how long that lasts, he said. But it wasn't a fluke. Jerry was consistent, dependable. By the end of Jerry's first year, he had more work than he could handle. He bought a second mixer, upgraded his truck, and the town noticed. Locals who'd once been afraid to speak up about Jerk now praised Jerry openly. Jerry never gloated. He never badmouthed his old boss. He had taken every insult, every belittling word, and used them as bricks to build a future. And now, that future was standing tall, proud, and unshakable. While Jerry's business was steadily rising, Jerk and Son's empire was quietly crumbling, and no one saw it coming faster than them. At first, it was small things. The familiar phone calls started drying up. General contractors who once lined up to hire Jerk suddenly answered with silence or excuses. But the truth was sharper, more painful. Jerry was taking his business, not just by being a better bricklayer, but by being a better person. The very thing Jerk had mocked, Jerry's quiet confidence and respect for others, was now his biggest advantage. The walls weren't just crooked. They were reminders of a man who'd lost his grip. "We're going in a different direction," they'd say. Or, "We're trying out someone new on this project." Jerk shrugged it off, blaming the economy, or the kids these days. Word spread fast in small towns, and soon Jerk's reputation took hits he couldn't repair. People began to wonder how someone so young could outperform the seasoned contractor who had once ruled the town. He spread rumors, tried to discredit Jerry's work, and even threatened to sue over petty issues. But no one believed him anymore. His words carried no weight. Now that man was a ghost. He felt the sting of dwindling work and the weight of his father's failing empire. Arguments between them became more frequent and heated. It was like watching a sinking ship with two captains blaming each other for every leak. No announcement, no fanfare, just a quiet end to an era defined by cruelty and lost opportunity. His constant yelling and abuse became legendary in all the wrong ways. It was about seeing that respect, integrity, and quiet confidence could triumph over arrogance and abuse. Subcontractors stopped recommending him. Workers refused to sign up for his jobs. Even longtime clients started whispering about finding alternatives. He called old clients, pleaded for another chance, offered discounts he couldn't afford. But the damage was done. At the job sites, the difference was clear. The once mighty brick contractor had been humbled by time and failure. Where Jerry's crew worked like a well-oiled machine, Jerk's jobs became chaotic. Deadlines slipped. Mistakes piled up. Jerk's son, once a brash sidekick, grew more withdrawn. Desperation crept in. Jerk, once the loudest voice on every site, now spent hours pacing his cluttered office, staring at unpaid bills and canceled contracts. Meanwhile, Jerry's star shone brighter. Clients raved about his professionalism and quality. Word-of-mouth recommendations became his most powerful marketing tool. The man who used to shout insults and treat his workers like dirt was now begging. Feeling a mix of pity and resolve, he said softly, "I built my confidence brick by brick without your help. You're the only one who ever got it right," swallowing hard. "I was a fool. If I'd treated you right," Jerry closed the door gently but firmly, "maybe things would have been different. I was wrong about you." And the news came quietly, almost as if no one wanted to say it out loud. Jerk and Son had gone out of business. Their bricklaying empire, once the unchallenged force in the small rural towns, had crumbled completely. And Jerry? Jerry was standing tall, the weight of it sinking in. This was the moment many would have marked with celebration, but Jerry felt none of that. Instead, there was calm, relief, a quiet closure that came from knowing he had done what he set out to do without losing himself in bitterness or revenge. Unbroken and victorious, not through confrontation, but through quiet strength. Jerk's attempts to undermine Jerry only made things worse. By working hard and treating people right, Jerry had become Jerk's greatest nightmare, the living proof that respect beats cruelty, and quiet confidence can shatter the loudest bullies. One day, after yet another contract slipped through his fingers, Jerk sat in his office with a bottle of cheap whiskey, staring at a photo of his younger self, the man who once controlled every brick laid in town. "I'm building something new now, something better." The final blow came quietly. Word reached Jerry through the grapevine that Jerk and Son's business was closing its doors. The words barely registered at first, no triumph, knowing that sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't to loud or messy. It is the success you build brick by brick, day by day, when no one is watching. No victory dance. He didn't plot their downfall or wish ill. His only goal had been to believe in himself, to build his own future with skill and integrity. Just a simple fact. A chapter closing. Jerry never celebrated. But maybe I was just breaking you. He didn't need to. Watching Jerk's downfall wasn't about joy. It was about justice. And in that small cluster of rural towns, the name Jerry became a symbol, not just of skill with bricks, but of what happens when you refuse to be broken. It was late one evening when Jerry heard a loud banging at his front door. He wasn't expecting anyone, especially not Jerk. But there he was, stumbling down the porch steps, a bottle of cheap whiskey in one hand and a desperate look in his bloodshot eyes. It was the natural result of pride turning to arrogance and hate turning to isolation. Jerry opened the door, surprised but composed. "Jerry," Jerk slurred. I need to talk." Jerry studied him quietly. "You're the best employee I ever had," Jerk admitted, voice shaky. Jerry raised an eyebrow, steady as ever. "Why didn't you ever tell me that when I was working for you?" he asked calmly. Jerk had no answer. He simply stared down at his scuffed boots. I'm sorry," Jerk finally muttered. "I thought I was toughening you up." Jerry sighed. "I didn't need your approval then." Jerk nodded. Jerry shook his head. "It's too late for that." With that, Jerk's pleading faded into the night. The once feared boss was now just a shadow of his former self. Months passed after that night. Jerry heard the news from a fellow contractor during a lunch break. He sat back in his chair. Jerry never intended to destroy Jerk and Son, but by simply standing tall, that final blow wasn't Jerry's doing. Jerry smiled softly to himself. Behind every strong man is a story. And behind Jerry's quiet strength was his father, a man who, despite being wheelchair-bound, carried a spirit so powerful it could move mountains. Jerry often talked about his dad as the real hero, a man who refused to let his disability define him, who worked hard to provide for his family and never asked for pity. Instead, he taught Jerry to stand tall, to believe in himself even when the world tried to tear him down. Jerry's father wasn't just a role model. He was a living lesson in resilience. When people doubted him, when obstacles loomed large, he faced every challenge head-on with a calm determination that was contagious. He showed Jerry that true strength wasn't about how loud you could yell or how hard you could hit. It was about how steady you could remain when everything else was falling apart. That foundation made all the difference. When Jerry was belittled and humiliated by Jerk and Son, he remembered his father's example. He didn't internalize the insults or let them shake his self-worth. It wasn't fragile pride or empty bravado. It was the steady flame passed down from a father who overcame far greater obstacles than a mean boss. Instead, he focused on the facts. He was a skilled bricklayer, a hard worker, and a man with something to prove, not to others, but to himself. Jerry's confidence was quiet, but unshakable because it was built on real lived experience. In the end, Jerry's story is about more than bricks and contracts. It's about the power of resilience, about how the lessons of one generation can quietly shape the next to rise above cruelty, injustice, and doubt. And it all started with a father in a wheelchair who refused to let life as hardships steal his dignity or his dreams. That's the true strength behind Jerry's revenge, the strength that no insult, no mockery, and no bully could ever break. He didn't scream, retaliate, or stoop to their level. He simply built something better. And in the end, Jerk and Son's downfall wasn't caused by Jerry. It was caused by their own inability to recognize greatness when it stood in front of them. If you love this story of calm revenge and quiet triumph, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more real-life justice, and share it with someone who's ever been underestimated. Some revenge stories end in fiery confrontation, but Jerry's was written in brick and silence.